It all began about a year ago, during a road trip in May of 1993, cutting across the United States. After months of convincing, I had finally persuaded my four closest friends, Mark, Jesse, Ryan, and Luke, as well as my girlfriend Claire, to join me on an epic journey across the country. Our plan was simple but thrilling: drive from Chicago to Asheville over 2 days, explore the vast, mysterious wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains, spend a night in a remote, almost mythic campsite deep in the forest, and then head back home. We had spent weeks meticulously planning every detail, from the cozy roadside motels and scenic Airbnb stops, to spontaneous detours in case we stumbled upon anything intriguing. Our families were excited, even my little sister begged to come along. But with my old car barely hanging together, and her being only 8 while the rest of us were in our 20s, she had to stay behind. That morning, we left Chicago at 5 a.m. under a cloudless sky, the kind that makes the world feel full of possibility. As we sped down endless stretches of highway, state after state blurred past our windows. The energy inside the car was lighthearted and full of anticipation. We had known each other since elementary school, and over the years our bond had only grown deeper. The best part about traveling with old friends is that the conversation never runs dry. Hours passed as we reminisced about childhood pranks, heartbreaks, and inside jokes. That kind of closeness is a double-edged sword. It connects you, but it also makes you vulnerable. The more someone means to you, the more of yourself you unknowingly reveal. I've always been open like that. Vulnerable. And honestly, I never cared if people thought I was quoting books or repeating something I'd heard in a movie. That sensitivity, it was just part of who I was. Early on, I suggested we make unplanned stops whenever something caught our eye: hidden trails, strange local signs, anything off the beaten path. Everyone was immediately on board. The idea of discovering forgotten corners of the country was too tempting to resist. We even packed swimsuits, just in case we found a lake or river inviting enough to dive into. Everything was going perfectly until we left the familiar flatlands of the Midwest and dipped into the South. Not long after turning off a scenic route, we rolled into a rundown gas station in a quiet mountain town tucked away in the western part of North Carolina. The place looked nearly abandoned. As I stepped inside the decrepit station, a cold unease settled over me. I asked Claire to stay in the car while I pumped gas. Something about the place made my skin crawl. A few shadowy figures loitered along the narrow streets, drifting aimlessly. Their blank, distant stares sent a chill down my spine. When we finally left the station, I was eager to get back on the road. But not long after, just a few miles from the nearest exit, I spotted an old wooden sign dangling crookedly off a side road. I slowed down, squinting to read the faded brown lettering barely clinging to the board. Yellow letters, nearly worn away by time, finally came into focus: "The source of life feeds the abandoned ponds." Right beside it, another sign, this one scrawled in a dark, ominous script, warned of the place. It spoke of people being drawn in by the source's pull, of spelunkers lost to its rumored labyrinth of underwater caves, never to be seen again. The warning should have sent us driving in the other direction. Instead, it sparked something in me. That strange, irresistible pull of curiosity. I turned to the group and asked if we could make a detour, to just see the place, nothing more. They hesitated. We were all a bit tired, and Asheville wasn't far now, just 1 state away. But they knew me. They knew how much I craved mystery. Eventually, they agreed. With a surge of excitement, I pulled off the road, and soon we found ourselves on a deserted gravel lot. In its center, oddly nestled into a stretch of faded gray asphalt, was a still, murky pond. Quiet. Unmoving. As if it had been waiting. The same sign stood nearby. "The fresh source feeds the abandoned ponds." Despite all the warnings, despite the eerie stillness of the place, something about the water stirred something deep inside me. Without hesitation, I dove in. The water was surprisingly cold and slightly murky, but refreshing in an oddly invigorating way. I swam for a few minutes, letting the chill seep into my skin, while my friends watched silently from the bank. A narrow stream trickled away from the pond, winding quietly into the dense darkness of the forest beyond. I found myself wondering where it led, what forgotten place it might reach. After my brief, almost ritual-like plunge into the unknown, I dried off, got back into the car, and we continued our journey. Asheville was still about 4 hours away. But something changed the moment we got back on the road. It started with a strange tension in the air. My friends were acting off. At first, I chalked it up to them being irritated about the detour, but when I asked if everything was okay, they all reassured me that they were fine. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching me. Not in an obvious way, just subtle things. Glances through the rearview mirror that lasted a bit too long. Conversations that seemed to stop when I tuned in. For a group that had always been open and loud, something about their silence felt unnatural. Eventually, I broke the tension. "Are you guys mad at me or something?" I asked. "We've been in this car for over 10 hours. It wouldn't be weird if someone's just in a bad mood." They all gave the same kind of answer, "Nah, man, it's all good. We're fine." But their tone didn't convince me. So I started to think maybe it was just me. I tried to push the growing unease away. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was reading too much into things. But then I caught Jake's eyes in the mirror again. His gaze was strange, almost analytical. It wasn't the look a friend gives you. It was something else. "What's up, dude?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Jake smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing. Seriously. Just wondering if you want me to take the wheel. You look kinda tense, like you're about to lose it." "I'm fine," I said quickly. "I've been driving for a few hours, yeah, but do I really look that bad?" "You don't look bad," he replied. "Just a little wired. I'm just offering if you need a break." "I'm good," I said firmly. "I'd rather keep driving." "All right," he muttered, leaning back in his seat like he was letting it go. We drove for another hour, and everything seemed to settle. But then the nausea hit me. It came on hard, sudden, intense, and unrelenting. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the road, but it lingered in the pit of my stomach like something rotten. And the eyes. I felt them again. My friends, stealing glances when they thought I wouldn't notice. Those fleeting looks in the rearview that hung just a second too long. That kind of look you give someone when they're not acting quite like themselves. I kept telling myself it was the long drive. Too many hours in a cramped car could mess with anyone. But somewhere deeper, I knew it wasn't just that. We finally made it to Asheville, and over the next few days, the tension eased. My nausea, though, didn't go away. I brought it up to the group, and we made a stop at a local pharmacy to get something for it. At that point, I blamed the weird energy on the simple fact that we were in close quarters for too long. Maybe that was part of it. But during those days, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something about the way they looked at me had changed, subtle, but there. On the fourth day, we set up camp at an old, slightly rundown site a few miles from a cluster of shadowy swamps in the heart of the Appalachian woods. The place had a strange reputation, one of those locations wrapped in eerie folklore passed down through generations. That afternoon, my nausea intensified to the point where I nearly lost control. My friends, oddly enough, all seemed perfectly fine. That contrast made it worse. We gathered inside a large 6-person tent that evening and settled in for the night. Eventually, only Jake and I remained awake, trading stories from the past under the dim light of a lantern. Then, without warning, Jake turned to me with an edge in his voice. "Why do you keep doing that?" I blinked. "Doing what?" His tone sharpened. "That gross thing you do. With your hand." I stared at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" He made an exaggerated motion, jamming his hand toward his mouth so forcefully his wrist nearly disappeared between his lips. "You did it twice today," he said. "It's disgusting. Stop it." I looked at him, baffled. "Dude, I was joking. It's just a stupid bit. I wasn't trying to freak anyone out." "Well, it's not funny," Jake snapped. His voice was tight now, almost angry. "You've been doing it a lot lately, sticking your fingers in your mouth and making those weird gestures." Even Claire didn't say anything. "What are you talking about?" I said, genuinely lost. And then Jake burst out laughing. Seeing the stunned look on my face, he couldn't hold it in. He laughed so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes. "It's not that bad," he said between chuckles. But I didn't laugh. Because I couldn't remember doing it even once. "That's just disgusting," Jake said mockingly. "You're acting like a lunatic. Just go to sleep." Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "If you keep it up, I'm cooking you eggs tomorrow and letting you eat your own germs instead of picking up after you." I stared at him, stunned. His voice carried a strange edge, like he wasn't joking, or maybe he was, but not entirely. He rolled over with a casual "good night, man," and went silent. I stayed where I was, fuming and confused. There was something unsettling in the way he'd spoken to me, something behind his eyes I hadn't seen before. Like he was seeing something in me that I couldn't. The tension twisted in my chest, so I quietly slipped out of the tent, needing air. The night was clear, stars sharp overhead. I tilted my head back to breathe, but the nausea slammed into me again, this time like a tidal wave. Stumbling, I rushed back to the car, switched on the interior light, and adjusted the rearview mirror until I could see my face. I don't know what I expected to find. Some kind of answer, maybe. But as I stared into my own eyes, a chill crept down my spine. A strange pressure grew inside me. My reflection began to change, not dramatically, not at first. Just wrong. My lips twitched into a warped, unnatural smile. It wasn't mine. It looked amused by something I didn't understand. Then, slowly, my mouth opened too wide, too slow, and I watched in paralyzed horror as my own hand lifted toward my lips. Inch by inch. Like I was trying to feed myself something invisible. Panicked, I yanked my hand away with force, trembling. It just hung there, limp and cold in my lap. I stared at it in terror, wondering if I had fallen asleep. Was I dreaming? No. Everything felt real. Too real. But I wasn't awake either. I was stuck somewhere in between, like the world had tilted off-center and left me stranded in its broken gravity. Eventually, I pulled myself together, bolted back to the tent, unzipped it with trembling fingers, and crawled inside like something was chasing me. I zipped it shut behind me fast, heart pounding. Now fully awake, I realized I was sweating, my stomach twisting violently. I thought I was going to throw up. My sudden movements must have woken Emily. I felt her hand on my back, gentle and warm. "What's wrong?" she whispered. "You okay?" "I feel sick," I muttered. "I'm scared." She sat up beside me, turned on her flashlight, and lit up the tent softly. The other shapes inside remained still asleep, or so I thought. In the silence that followed, I heard it. A whisper. Faint. My name. I froze. "Hey," Emily said, her voice uncertain. She touched my shoulder again. "Hey, what's?" "I heard someone," I whispered. Panic bubbled up in my throat. Someone said my name. That got everyone's attention. In a flurry of rustling sleeping bags, the others sat up, confused and half awake. "What's going on?" someone asked, groggy and tense. "I swear," I gasped, "someone just whispered my name." A suffocating silence fell over the tent. We stared at one another, unmoving. No one spoke. And that's when I saw it. Through a tiny flap in the tent, one we hadn't zipped all the way shut, I saw an eye. Huge. Luminous. Unblinking. It glowed faintly with a pale, unnatural light. It wasn't human. And it wasn't blinking. Before I could speak, the canvas of the tent ripped open with a shriek of tearing fabric. A long, grotesque arm shot through the opening, flailing wildly. The force of it knocked me back against the floor as my stomach lurched violently. I began to vomit uncontrollably. Something massive wrapped itself around my neck. I couldn't breathe. And then an unbearable tearing sensation. Like something was being ripped out of me. Strangely, as it happened, the nausea vanished. It was gone. Replaced by something else. Not relief, exactly, but emptiness. The tent collapsed around us in chaos. Screams. Shouts. And the last thing I remember, the last thing burned into my mind, was that eye. That bright, soulless eye. I don't know how much time passed before help arrived. Eventually, the police pulled me from the wreckage of the tent, dazed and unable to speak. By the time the other campers realized something unspeakable had happened, it was already too late. The authorities found the remains of my friends scattered across the campsite, twisted, shredded, torn apart. Later, they blamed it on a wild boar. A boar. As if that could explain anything. No one believed my story. Not the rangers. Not the doctors. Not even my own parents. They called it a hallucination. A trauma response. A nightmare. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. I miss them, Mark, Jesse, Ryan, and Claire. God, I miss Claire. I love them more than I can say. I should never have stepped into that cursed pond. Something in that water, something ancient and hidden in that forgotten patch of Appalachian forest, marked me. And I know now. That moment changed me forever.